Hi, I'm Federico, and I'm here to present my film Indrasnet. I think that to become a filmmaker, one needs an inspiration. Films are a means of communication, a way to share your ideas with the world. I think that the best filmmakers are those who have a strong and sincere message to deliver, something that can be seen and understood by everyone, but that nobody has really looked at in that way before.
If you went to a university and studied ethnology, what you have are people of, let's say, developed cultures putting their subjective categories on indigenous peoples. I wanted to do just the opposite. I wanted to take indigenous peoples and put their subjective categories on our progressive culture.
I grew up on the slopes of Mount Etna, the highest and most active volcano in Europe. Living in such a place offers you a choice. You can either look down towards the artificial world of the city and society, or you can look up towards, well, everything else. My inspiration to become a filmmaker finds its roots in the simple decision of looking up, deciding that my life would be driven by the desire to push my limits further and further, higher and higher. I found the link between human and nature itself in extreme sports such as climbing, skiing, paragliding and so on, where humans use artificial technology to conquer any elements of nature, becoming part of it again. And from a simple passion that became my life. I was soon categorized as different in school. I don't mean that I had a hard time at all, but I was always an outsider. There were very few things that I had in common with other students. But this never bothered me, and I never questioned my position in society or the reason and consequences of my life choices. I've always been an instinctive person, and probably this is what was preventing me from realizing the real potential of being different. What pulled the trigger that would lead me to becoming a filmmaker was philosophy. The debate on reality, perspective and perception made me realize how limited we are by our own existence.
And he had a theory of light, which was mechanical, and recognized that the retinal image, what's on your retina, is not the cube rotating in space. Or let's say if I look at the audience, I see people sitting around and so on, but that's not the retinal image. The retinal image is some complicated two-dimensional display which could be interpreted in all sorts of ways. Descartes recognized that what you see must be a construction of the mind, has to come from the inside. The sensory organs just provide the occasion, or experience, which hits the sensory organs, provides the occasion for the mind to construct experience using its own internal resources, its own cognoscitive powers in the terms of the day.
I started to look at the world with Protagoras' voice constantly shouting in my head, "Man is the measure of all things," and I slowly began to realize how living on the edge of extreme puts you in a position where normal perspective is altered. If you ask an extreme athlete what they like about this sport, they will probably start with the usual, "I love the adrenaline and the strong emotions, blah blah blah." But what really makes extreme sports different from everything else is how they alter your subjective perception of the world. When you're flying over the highest mountains or skiing down the steepest slopes or climbing up the most demanding ridges, not only does your visual perspective of the world change, allowing you to experience point of view that would be otherwise inaccessible to human beings, but also what really changes is your existential perspective as you walk on that thin line between life and death. Obviously, we're not risking our lives just like that. There are a number of safety measures, but your subconscious doesn't know about them. And what you really experience is a leaving behind of the limits of your existence, a struggle to reach a new dimension as you abandon the ordinary world, if we can call it as such. Everything looks different from that external perspective. One of the philosophers who inspired me on this journey to become a filmmaker is Nietzsche, and his study on perspectivism. He said, "From whatever you wish to know and measure, you must take your leave, at least for a time. Only when you have left the town can you see how high that its towers rise above the houses." I finally realized that I needed to find a way to share my perspective with others, show the world through a point of view that is unusual and different from the everyday experience of life. I think that modern society has swallowed us, and now we're so submerged in it that the search for a new perspective is now becoming more than just a curiosity, but a need for many people. The repetitiveness of city life is now more than ever a reason to look beyond, to a world where rules and constrictions are substituted by raw wilderness and adventure. Unfortunately, not all have the luxury of dedicating their life to adventure and extremeness, and this is where I come in as a filmmaker. Film has been used to communicate many things, from the debate on existence of Kubrick's 2001: Space Odyssey to the question of evil and morality of Kim Ki-duk's Pieta and so on. But what I'm most interested in is not what message can a film deliver, but rather how can a film share an experience that can be read and interpreted subjectively by the viewer.
The films were from the beginning conceived as incomplete in their form. I know that might sound silly, because it's not a story to be told, it's a story to behold. If there are 10 people that are watching the movie, after the first 5 leave because it's boring or they don't get it, there'll be 5 more people. I'll guarantee you that each one of them will have a different experience of the movie, because the audience completes the subject, not me. I don't want to be a propagandist. That's why I didn't want to make a traditional documentary film.
Directors like Godfrey Reggio challenge the idea that a film should tell the audience what to think. Instead, his films use associative and dissociative patterns, rhythms, colors, and so on to create a sensorial experience. The minds of his viewers are in this way stimulated to develop a reading of the film, which is completely subjective to their point of view. In an interview on Koyaanisqatsi, Reggio gave his definition of his film. He said, "It's meant to offer an experience rather than an idea. For some people, it's an environmental film. For some, it's an ode to technology. For some people, it's a piece of shit, or it moves people deeply. It depends on who you ask. It's the journey that is the objective." But how do you obtain this experience? The answers to this question can be infinite, but the key element is language. Using verbal language directs the attention of the viewer towards specific elements and ideas, and it introduces a strong point of view. By substituting verbal communication with a narrative that bases its structure on other elements, we can deliver an experience which is left open for the audience to interpret. Everyone will focus on whatever element of the film they are more sensitive to, building subjective pillars for the personal interpretation based on individuality and life experiences.
I decided early on that I would give up language. Let me tell you why. For me, language is the most important thing in the world. We see the world through the language that we speak. I feel tragically, however, that our languages, your language, my language, the language of most of the people of the world that are in a modern society, those languages no longer describe the world in which we live. So I thought that it would be much more efficacious to make a film without words that would that Napoleonic statement, a picture's worth 1,000 words. This would be to flip that on its head, to give you 1,000 pictures, to offer you the power of one word, Koyaanisqatsi.
With my film Indra's Net, I want to share my personal perspective. Just as when Protagoras said, "Man is the measure of all things," I am the measure of what I perceive, and Indra's Net is the world through my measure. I'm not trying to hide subjectivity, I'm glorifying it, because I think that the only way to get closer to the answer of any of the questions we ask ourselves is to look at the subject under discussion through the most perspectives we can. This way, films become a way to reach a more comprehensive perception and understanding of the world.